Hi folks, it's been a while. I hope I still remember how to do this. I'm going to pick up looking through this book that we have looked through before, What Life Was Like in the Age of Chivalry. And we've covered a couple of parts of this book so far. We'll see how much we look into tonight. I'm going to start with the section where we left off, titled To the Manor Born. In this photo, the lord of the manor discusses the grape harvest with his general manager while peasants hoe the soil, pick fruit, prune vines, and crush grapes in this Flemish portrayal of a typical manor scene. Inside the building at left, two more workers taste wine stored in the barrels. Must be the lord of the manor here. Or here. I'm not sure which. No, I think here. This one says, a peasant's daily work was dictated by the demands of the seasons of the year, as depicted in the agricultural calendar at left. So this is an agricultural calendar. To perform their tasks, workers could rely on various farming implements, such as scythes and shovels, but no tool was more important to farming than the heavy wheeled plow. It's shown here. The plow shown at right is a late medieval model, as evidenced by the padded horse collar, an improvement that allowed the speedier horse to replace the ox as a draft animal. Yeah, I think this later invention, this type of horse collar, before that, I think they used to put the horse collars behind, or the way they'd harness up these instruments or wagons or whatever it was, back here, like around their, behind their front legs, kind of in their shoulders and almost on their stomach. And, you know, that made it didn't work as well. They couldn't pull as much. And when they kind of figured out this way of doing it up over the shoulder like that, the horse could more easily pull those heavy loads. So this is a calendar. I guess this would be all 12 months. I've got 12 boxes here representing the different seasons, I guess, or the different months of the year. I guess in the winter and early spring, you're getting the fields ready and clearing things out. And your main harvest is here in the later summer. And then I guess this is showing the winds blowing of fall. This one says, in front of a dwelling that was home to valuable livestock, as well as humans, a peasant couple perform a regular household chore, chopping and gathering wood. Probably was a pretty much non-stop effort. And this one is talking about these items. Metal was both scarce and valuable, so the iron cauldron at left probably belonged to a wealthy landowner. The pots and tableware of the poor generally were made of earthenware or wood, like the pitcher and spoon below. kind of a classic medieval style. While others wait their turn, a peasant, his knees bent in humility, pays his dues, money, goods, or livestock, to the lord of the manor. A lot of the in this era, generally most people didn't own any land, and they were all subsistence farmers. They did the work on the land, but had to pay or give a lot of the crops back to the landowner, the wealthy landowner. And this one looks like maybe a revolt of some kind. Pushed to extremes by hard work and heavy taxes, axe-wielding peasants exact revenge on a representative of the ruling classes, a solitary knight. Maybe I'll read this larger box. The smaller caption here says, a formerly trained physician identified by his splendid robes uses the widespread diagnostic technique of examining a patient's urine. And this little caption says, and that's for this photo, a physician conducts a hands-on examination which could reveal abscesses, swelling, or tumors. And over here we have the guidebook. It says, this guidebook of diagnosis and treatment was worn at a physician's waist. It also had astrological charts to predict the outcome of an illness. Health and healing in the Middle Ages. The people of the Middle Ages were afflicted with many of the same sicknesses, from cancer to nosebleeds, that exist today, but they also had to contend with a variety of skin lesions and other ailments that are no longer scourges they once were. Diseases such as smallpox, leprosy, St. Anthony's fire, and St. Vitus' dance were products of the unsanitary living conditions, overcrowding, and malnutrition that characterized the lives of the majority of Europe's population. At that time, disease was thought to result from an imbalance in the four fluids, or humors, of the body: choler, phlegm, black bile, and blood. The physician's task was to restore the balance of these humors. Means at his disposal included cauterization, surgery, diet, and medicine. A common medical practice was bloodletting, in which a specific vein was opened to treat a particular disease. The blood was then checked for distinctive properties such as smell or greasiness. Medical science during the Middle Ages became increasingly sophisticated and even extended to the study of cadavers. Profusely illustrated manuals guided apprentice doctors through every step of patient diagnosis. There were charts to aid in inspecting urine for color, smell, and sedimentation, calendars and tables for use in astrological medicine, manuals on techniques of bloodletting, pharmaceutical reference books depicting herbs and their applications, and collections of recipes for balms and potions. Members of the medical community ranged from university-trained doctors, strongly influenced by centuries of Greek and Islamic insight, to traditional healers who learned their craft through apprenticeship to other folk practitioners. The care provided by a formerly trained doctor was priced beyond the reach of most people. Although in the early 13th century, some Italian cities retained physicians to treat the poor for free. And during the 14th and 15th centuries, religious communities offered the poor an aged refuge in hospitals, providing food, shelter, and prayer, along with limited medical care. On the whole, however, during the Middle Ages, such care for agrarian peasants and poor city dwellers alike was limited to the ministrations of village healers, herbalists, and barber surgeons, as well as to self-medication and visits to mineral baths. This photo, or that painting, or illustration, a woman holds a bowl to catch blood spurting from a bloodletting incision on her arm. This illustration, a 14th century illustration, identifies the herb fultas used to treat epilepsy. Physicians prescribed local plants for poorer patients, but more exotic herbs for the affluent. Here's another illustration in that sort of classic medieval style. The legend of Robin Hood. Over the years, Robin Hood has been depicted in many guides as a yeoman or officer in a noble household. Shown here, as a nobleman himself, one unlawfully denied his inheritance, as an Anglo-Saxon patriot defending his homeland against the conquering Normans, and finally as the character that we know today, the romantic bandit who fought for the common people against the greedy landlords. Historical evidence for a figure from justice named Robin Hood dates back to 1296, and a number of medieval ballads and plays feature an outlaw by that name. But the noble figure who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor remains elusive, a myth-clad scoundrel who has robbed history of his true identity. The Maid of Orleans. Clad in armor and holding her sword, Joan of Arc prepares to fight for the man she thought the rightful king of France, Charles VII. Shown here. Behind her is the standard she carried into battle. Joan's helmet, which was similar to the one at right, would become a votive offering in an Orleans church. They have a short Joan of Arc story. It's short enough. I mean, the Joan of Arc story is very interesting. I don't know if this one is, long enough or short enough to get in, but I'll go ahead and read it. Hopefully it's a good one. I did not read this ahead, so we're going to learn about it right now together. Some 90 years into the 100 Years' War, a young peasant girl named Joan was called upon to perform a great service for her beleaguered country. The commission, which she claimed came from God himself, was to deliver France from the hands of the English. Short and sturdy, with black hair and a ruddy complexion, the girl seemed an unlikely national savior. Like the other children in her poor village in northeastern France, she had a daily routine that included household and farm chores, and taking part in the occasional festivals that brightened an otherwise harsh existence. But in time, her countrymen would call this seemingly unremarkable child the Maid of Orleans, the history would know her as Joan of Arc. Joan was just 13 years old when she later said, "God sent a voice to guide me." Joan heard the voices frequently over the next few years, and eventually she determined to heed their call to action. In January of 1429, she made her way to the Loire Valley where Charles VII of France, successor to a throne denied him by the English, held court. There, in a man's black tunic and boots, and with her hair cropped short, she addressed Charles. "The King of Heaven," she declared, "sends me to you with the message that you shall be anointed and crowned in the city of Reims." She continued, "Will you believe that I am sent by God?" Whether Charles believed or not, Joan managed to win his backing for her cause. Hundreds of others had no doubts and flocked to her banner, a white satin standard with images of Christ, the world, 2 angels, and the lilies of France. I'm going to use the sort of American pronunciations here. Heartened, Joan set out to raise the English siege of Orleans, 70 miles southwest of Paris. Led by Joan, the French army successfully made its way through hostile territory, and in May 1429 drove the English from Orleans. After a series of victories against the enemy in the Loire, Joan and her followers entered Reims. There, less than 6 months after she had left her village, Joan witnessed the highlight of her life, the coronation of Charles VII. Once the ceremony was over, however, Joan was anxious to march on Paris. But she would have to wage this campaign without the support of the king, who was reluctant to fight on. Soon, Joan's military fortunes began to falter. Her attack on Paris failed, and during a battle north of the city the following spring, she fell into the hands of the English. Joan then discovered that she had more enemies than those she faced on the field of battle. Concluding that her voices were more likely from the devil than from God, the Vicar General of the Inquisition demanded that she be tried for witchcraft and heresy. In the end, both camps passed judgment on her. On May 29, 1431, the French bishops excommunicated her, and on May 30, the English army burned her at the stake. 25 years after the execution, Pope Calixtus III annulled Joan's guilty verdict. Her rehabilitation had begun. The process would not be complete until 1920, when another pope, Benedict XV, canonized her a saint, reclaiming for God the young peasant woman that the Church had condemned 500 years before. This caption says, though unable to read or write, Joan, or in French, Jeanne, could sign her name as evidenced by her signature on this 1429 letter. Eyes on a crucible. Joan awaits death at the stake. Fearing damnation for burning a saint, her executioner would later flee to a monastery. Gathering at the tavern. Village taverns sprang up, replacing private alehouses. Minstrels and troubadours entertained patrons with songs like this one from the Carmina Burana. I won't read all that. It's a very interesting piece, though, if you get a chance or have not already heard that. Some folks enjoying the tavern. And there's some of those performers. Here's some folks playing a game. This medieval game, a forerunner of baseball, was played with a semi-spherical ball that was probably made of cloth or leather and was filled with bran. Interesting. Don't know about that game. This one says Holiday Revelry. Seasonal fairs, markets, and country festivals offered a much-needed respite from the daily grind of farm labor. Bands of dancers, jugglers, acrobats, puppeteers, and musicians traveled from village to village to perform at the numerous outdoor celebrations held during the spring and summer months. But the inclusion of dancing on church holy days worried the clergy, who said that it resulted in unclean kissings and other unhonest handlings. Indeed, Morris dancing and traveling puppet shows did include elements of ancient pagan rites, linking them irrefutably in the eyes of some with the work of the devil. Caption says, some marriages were performed by the clergy, but many more were celebrated privately with a ring, a promise, and an exchange of dowry. So this says that consanguinity charts like this one determine the marriageability of partners by their kinship ties. So maybe that's depicting like sort of familial relationships. I'm not sure. This looks like it's showing a family tree. And the caption is, found within the chancel of a 500-year-old church near Norwich, England, these stone heads are thought to be the only true-life representations of Squire John Paston and his lady. The family tree at right chronicles the lineage of Paston's wife, Margaret Montaby, up until their marriage in 1440. And everybody has a crest. Well, I guess we've reached the end of this section, so I'll wrap this video up here. I hope you found it relaxing. If you like this video, it'd be great if you could subscribe to the channel. Maybe hit that like button. Feel free to give me any comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.